I know it's going to be a little longish session, 1.5 hours and then another 1.5 hours. But so do ask questions. The reason why I won't be asking more questions is, I mean, we can make it interactive, but I thought some more interesting details need to be discussed. So I will go through these. And therefore it's. So if you don't follow any of the topics here, please do raise hands and we can stop and discuss again. Okay. So just to quickly recap, Katha is the formal debate where you have at least two people representing two different ideas, talking about one idea, representing two views on that one idea, and trying to talk about the pros and cons or the prabalya daurbalya of each idea, each view, and they are scholars in that field. Okay, so that is the katha, and within that katha we have vada, jalpa, and vitanda. Vada is truth seeking, that is the primary objective. Jalpa is victory, the primary objective, and Vitanda also victory with concealing one of the positions of one of the persons. Okay, and in the process per se, the Vada uses only valid and fair means. So you use right evidence, right techniques, whereas in Jalpa and Vitanda, you are allowed to use tricks such as chala and jati, which I will be talking next. So you basically misrepresent the opponent's view and try to win over in a way that the opponent finds it difficult to find out, etc. Okay, so a few basics about the actual mechanics of conducting a vada. Now, so you have two people. So one whom let's designate, as I said, I mean, one Vadi, the other Prativadi. So Vadi to start the debate. So the idea is the topic and the methodology of whether it is going to be Vada, Jalpa, or Vitanda is decided by the jury and the chairpersons, knowing what the qualification and the intention of these people are. So they coin the term on, okay, this is going to be Vada, this is the topic, this is how you're going to participate. These are the errors. Just like, I mean, imagine this like a cricket match where you have some rules, and there are also rules of how to get the opponent out. Okay, so you appeal to the jury that, okay, this person needs to be declared out, and that is the Nigrahasthāna, which we will be talking next. So in the argument, I'm seeing this error in this person's argument, so declare him to be defeated, and that is the appeal you make to the jury. And that jury, or what we call prashnika technically, is the person who evaluates and decides, okay, yes, this person has won. But this is not going to intervene. So I'll give you the specific details, but okay, so let's go step by step. So Vadi starts the debate. So there is a topic under discussion. So the debater gives a direct evidence first. By direct evidence, what we mean is, this is important. The term anumana in that pratyaksha anumana agama context that we previously discussed is generally seen as a kind of an indirect evidence. You're seeing a smoke, then you infer fire. So when somebody asks for evidence of, let's say, dharma, or evidence for God, evidence for reality of this world, evidence for reality of our conversation, things like that. So what is the evidence that you start with? You can start with some logical argument. Well, if this were not to be the case, then this may have been the result, but we are not seeing that result, and therefore our initial assumption is wrong. So that can be an argumentative approach. The other is, well, here is the proof. Let's say some Vedic reference, some direct reference of my experience. What is the proof that you exist? Well, I exist because I know I exist. I don't need to give you any more proof that, well, it may be an illusion, so somebody can argue. So then you provide a further evidence. But the first evidence that you give is a direct evidence. So it is usually a textual evidence. Prishtena agama eva adau vaktavyaha is the usual principle. So when you ask for an idea, so you give a direct textual reference. Okay, this is the proof to say why this is the case. Then prativadi, the opponent, will give an alternative interpretation for the text that you have given as evidence. So that is the second step. So Vadi gives a textual reference. The Prativadi gives an alternative interpretation to prove his point. Let's say there is a debate on, I think so many of you may be aware of one Janmasthana question with Hanumanji on whether his Janmasthana is in Hampi, Vijayanagara, or in Tirupati. So there is a debate within the Shastric community there. So you give some references from Puranas that, okay, see, Tirupati is considered the Anjanadri, etc., etc. So there is, so you give some references. So the other party, which believes that it is Hampi or the Pampa Kshetra, Vijayanagara, well, no, look at the context of that chapter. So it is not necessarily talking about birthplace, it is talking about the place where he was playing. So you don't need to literally take that as birthplace. So here is another evidence that says this is the birthplace. So I'm just cooking up some things, but there is actually a literal debate on these questions. But so you have two opinions or two positions. So how do you prove? So you start with your references, your basis. The opponent gives the alternative interpretation to this, provided this evidence is considered an evidence by the opponent. The difference is this. See, when you start with an evidence, the meaning of that evidence may be contested, but the validity of the source itself is not contested. So you're giving a Puranic reference. So the opponent is not going to say that, no, I don't believe in those Puranas. In which case, you cannot give Purana as a reference there. So I think, as we were discussing yesterday, there must be some common ground. So that is already decided between these two parties. Okay, both agree on the validity of Puranas. Okay, I'm now giving you a Puranic reference. So, but this is not matching my view. So what I'll do some reinterpretation. Reinterpretation not in some fancy way, like, okay, this is some figuratively said. So I give some in the modern world, the word interpretation has a very bad meaning. Interpretation doesn't mean I can interpret in the way I want. It has to be logically derived from that original text. So therefore you have a Puranic reference. So the opponent will give an alternative interpretation to that, which is grammatically, logically, linguistically valid, and say that in addition, I have a direct reference to my case. So one person started with Tirupati as the option. So I gave, no, the word here has to be interpreted in this way. And I give Hampi as an alternative, and here are my references. So then the first person will now reject or reinterpret the verses or the proof given by the second party, and reject the reinterpretation done by the second party to establish his own original point. Getting the point, right? So you started with evidence 1. Party 2 gives reinterpretation of evidence 1 and gives evidence 2 to his own, to further his case. Then again, first party reinterprets evidence 2 to suit his evidence and rejects the second interpretation given for his first evidence, so that it is, it syncs with his opinion or the position. So this goes on. So you give, you reinterpret, you provide another other evidence, and the other person rejects the reinterpretation and establishes the initial interpretation, and rejects the interpretation of the new evidence. So that goes on, but obviously it can't keep on going infinitely. So you use logic to establish which of these makes more sense. Well, you said this is the reason for reinterpretation. Let's evaluate whether this logic makes sense. So So you use anumana at that point. So initially you started with agama, you started with direct evidence. But when the conflict arose between the right interpretation of that evidence, then you start using logic as to know, you are providing this reinterpretation, but this is not matching with the previous chapter's narration. So it seems illogical to make this interpretation for this verse. Therefore, my position is correct. Yes. Ah. Ah.
So, is it necessary for the person who is opposite to that idea to have a position? Like, for example, if you are interpreting as a Vadi.
You missed the first session.
Sorry.
So, because we talked about exactly that point, where in Vitanda, you don't need to have an opposite position. Whereas in Jalpa and Vada, you need to have one position. So both parties have their own positions. Whereas in Vitanda, one person has a position, the opponent rejects the position but does not have a position of his own.
This discussion, can I relate that literature review, and after that, in the literature review, if you find anything which is not relating with the site visit I'm having, so this type of contradiction, what happens? Can I relate this thing with this also?
Well, that is the you can. I mean, but I won't put it in the basket of debates, but that is in the basket of interpreting data. So, which is more of the Mimamsa approach of how there are multiple frameworks, Upakrama, Upasamhara, what comes prior, what comes at the end, what is something that is being repeated. So how do you distill out from the literature what is the main message? How do I reinterpret the literature to suit a narrative that I am talking about because of these reasons? So that methodology is applicable for literature review also, though that is not exclusively to debate culture. I agree.
Because I'm quite matching with that. The
Yeah,
literature
sure,
review,
sure.
if I find anything missing it with the site visit and literature review, then comes those debates that whether I shall follow that literature review or not.
Correct.
Can we take an example and discuss this? Because now what you are proposing is quite valid. I mean, if there is some proposition, then it has to be refuted. Now, this is something that makes sense to me. But to concretely understand what you are saying, also, I want to add something to this. For example, if today, if some proposition is stated as a mathematical formula, we know the rules of the game. And the rules of the game are quite clear that these operations will apply, these are the conditions, and there is a body of literature which justifies use of a particular interpretation. The observation also, I mean, in modern paradigm, experimental results. So this is the method, these are the criteria under which these things have been observed. Now, how do I do it with the previous ones? If we take some example, maybe things will be more clear.
Sure. So I'll start with one simple example.
Also,
but for your second question, I think some 3-4 slides will give that big picture of the methods of the basic rules and the steps that ones follow. That will also make it clearer in a few minutes. But yeah. So you had another point?
Yeah. Okay, maybe
Sure. I mean, in another 5-10 minutes, we will get more clarity. Then we can take that. So, the steps that you're talking about. So, now, what are the rules in the game? So that, for example, so all these the 5 avayavas. So let's say the debate is between the difference between body and the jiva, deha and atma, as being two different entities, or are they same entities? So the one philosophical school would call that anything that is not materialistic is actually unreal. It doesn't exist. So the kevala bhautika vada would say that the deha bhinna jiva doesn't exist. So that is one position. but most of the Astika schools would believe or argue that there is a jiva that is different from the deha. So now that's the debate going on. So now how you start? So you start with the question of jiva. I believe that jiva exists because I have the experience that this is my body, rather than saying I am the body. So my experience becomes the evidence. My the the form of my experience, the way in which I articulate what I'm experiencing is that I'm not experiencing as I am the body. I'm experiencing that this is my body. So the term my is referring to an entity that is different from the body is the statement that I start with. So I'm giving a direct evidence, which is my experience, to establish that there is an entity called jiva different from the body. So the opponent would argue that, well, this experience that you're suggesting is a figurative usage of the word my body. We many times use the word my soul also, or my jiva also. Then what is that word my referring to? It is referring to the jiva. Or when you say my soul, my is also referring to the soul. So just because you have used the word my, it doesn't necessarily mean that the two are different. In fact, I also use that I am short, I am tall, which is referring to my body. So there is experiential or the usage based evidence that I am tall, which refers to the body. So I and body are one and the same. And the evidence that you have given that it is my body is how I refer, that can be a figurative usage. So that is how you reinterpret the evidence given by the first person, and you provide another evidence to claim to put your point across, right? So then the first person would start saying that, well, you do say that I am dark, or I am fair, I am tall, etc. How do you say that that is a figurative use? That is not a figurative usage, whereas this one is figurative or metaphorical, etc. So you don't have direct evidence to say that yours is different, whereas I do have direct evidence to say that my body, etc. The actual debate is a very long one, so I can't go to the third step, fourth step, etc. But this is just to give you an example of, okay, here is one piece of evidence, there's another piece of evidence, so you reinterpret and provide another. Then the first person will reinterpret the position taken by the second person and give further evidence. So then he would say, okay, I will give you evidence from the Shastras that say that jiva and deha are different. So this guy would then start saying, well, I don't believe in the Shastras. But then that is a very different line of argument that the debate would then take. But if the person believes in the Shastras, then he has to give a reinterpretation where jiva and deha are considered different in the Shastra. So he would say, then no, this is only for contemplative purposes and not necessarily for reality, because you may contemplate things that can be unreal also. So things like that. So you proceed in that way. But finally, you have to use some logical basis to come to some conclusion. We will talk about what is the logical framework a little later. So a few more specifics on the methodology of conducting debates. So Jalpa and Vitanda necessarily require judges, because you're fighting against each other and trying to win over the other party. So obviously you're not going to concede your defeat voluntarily. So there has to be some person who is going to tell you that no, you actually lost the debate. So and that is the role of what's called a prashnika, loosely translatable as a judge or a jury. Then you also have sabhapati, or the chairpersons. So that's the in that vertical of things that I had, people, process, and purpose. You can also talk about components or people other than the actual debaters, is prashnikas, the chairpersons. Those are required in the Jalpa and Vitanda, whereas they are not necessary for Vada. However, if they are there, let's say there is a prashnika who is capable of being a jury. If such a person is available, do include him even in your Vada, because the person will have some insights for helping you to resolve the truth. Though his role is not as a jury, his role is as a participant in the debate, if it is Vada. In Jalpa and Vitanda, he is not a participant, but he is only trying to adjudicate matters as to which party is having more logical power. So, but who is such a judge or a prashnika? Ragadvesha vihinastu sarvavidya visharadaha. Vihinastu sarvavidya visharadaha. Prashnika iti vigneya. Ekova prashnika iti vigneya. I forget the last verse. Anyway, so essentially they are ragadvesha vihinaha. So they are not the oath that many of the public office bearers would take. So without favor or fear, right? So I'm not partial, basically. So raga and dvesha would make me work unnecessarily in favor of one person or unnecessarily against another person. So such should not be their mental makeup. Correct. No conflict of interest also. So ragadvesha vihina, there is no fear or favor, there is no hatred or attachment towards anything. At the same time, they should also be experts in the field. How can they otherwise make a judgment? In fact, for that reason, we have what are these the tribunals, which were recent additions, recent meaning a couple of decades ago, in the judicial system. Because when cases such as some environmental violation, rules violation, etc., went to the court, how would the jury decide on what is the environmental impact assessment of some program? Because they're not environmentalists. They may know some constitutional law, some basic legal and criminal principles. So you required people there from that domain expertise. Therefore, different green tribunal, so all the telecom tribunal. So there are multiple things that got established. So basically for this purpose, so you need expertise in that domain. So expertise in the domain and ragadvesha vihinatva is the main criteria for a prashnika, for a judge. In Vada, they are optional, because anyway these guys themselves don't have raga and dvesha. The participants are here for truth seeking. They are not there for victory. So you don't need them. However, if they are available in the discussion room, please do involve them so that truth seeking becomes easier. The difference between the errors in Vada, Jalpa, and Vitanda, we will talk about the errors in some time, but at a broad level, minor errors like, well, I start with something. I'll give you examples of those in a minute. And the opponent shows some errors there. Then I change and I fine tune the position that I have taken. In Jalpa or Vitanda, that is good enough to be called victory. So I started with a position that, for example, Atman is real, Atma is permanent. Okay. The opponent would say, are you saying Atman is permanent, in which case you're referring to the Paramatman, and Paramatman is different, eternal is also acceptable to me. So you're starting a debating point which was not even contested. So choosing a point that is not contested is an error. So then he says, no, I was not talking about Paramatman, I was talking about Jivatman, which is the contested point between the two of us. So then that guy says, but you didn't start with Jivatman, but you just used the word Atman. So therefore you are wrong. So that is good enough in Jalpa or Vitanda to declare the first person as being defeated because of the inaccuracy of the words used. Whereas in Vada, you can say, yes, I mean, it was just some articulation error. We are not worried about how good I was in articulating. Let's correct that and let's move ahead. Okay, I was wrong in using the word. Let's do the correction and move forward. So that is not a second part of the debate, but it is the same debate continuing in Vada. Whereas in Jalpa or Vitanda, you lose it. You lose the game, and the opponent wins by showing your articulation error. So minor errors also are critical in Jalpa or Vitanda approaches, whereas in Vada, you only look at major Tattva Nirnaya Vailomyam Vade Sakshat Parajayaha. Only if they are obstructing the very purpose of finding the truth, then you declare one of them as defeated in Vada. Because in Vada, there is no intent of winning or losing. You are intending to find the truth. But one of them is adamant on not accepting the error that he is making in pushing the argument, and everybody is able to understand that this guy is not willing to give up. So then you consider that the person is not worthy to be continued as a co-debater. So you stop the Vada there. So you can't make a truth resolution with such a person. So but because we have assumed that people have come to Vada with the notion of Tattva Nirnaya, such things do not happen. So only point out major errors. So you're using some wrong logic, you show that, the person changes, then you go forward. Whereas in Jalpa or Vitanda, even minor errors need to be taken as points of defeat. One last point before we actually go to the actual errors. Jalpa and Vitanda are among equals. There is a popular saying that these texts quote, Vivahascha Vivadascha Samayoreva Shobhate. Vivaha and Vivada, here Vivada referring to Jalpa and Vitanda, they are to be among equals. Yayoreva samam vittam, yayoreva samam shrutam, tayor vado vivahascha, na uttamadhamayoh kvachit. So the two who have same knowledge base and same economic status, yayoreva samam vittam, yayoreva samam shrutam. Shrutam is they have heard, that means they have learned similarly. So such people should enter into Vada or Vivaha. So therefore, the debate has to be, so, but how do you decide? Now that people are trying to win over each other, how do you decide prior to the actual debate that they are equal? So only when they enter into a debate, you get to know that they have some reasonably equal amount of knowledge base. So what the text suggests is you choose a topic that is conducted in the form of Vada first. So that, okay, there is, you have two people, let them take two positions and let them do a Vada. It need not be up to the conclusion, or it is not to find the truth per se, but it is only to evaluate their knowledge base and are they equal enough, etc. So you conduct a Vada first. If they seem to be of similar caliber, then you arrange for a Jalpa or a Vitanda. So that I mean, it is like some kind of a qualification tournament before the actual tournament begins. So you have some screening that, okay, at least some equally compatible teams should play in the final tournament. So you initially handle these in the sense of Vada, because Vada can happen between Uttama and Madhyama, or Uttama and Adhama. So which are not equal, because the goal there is to find truth. Why should we worry about what is my status, how much have I learned, am I of equal caliber with you to be debating? because we are just interested in truth seeking. Even the person who claims to have multiple PhDs and a long-term professor may be wrong on certain things. So, and he is humble enough to accept that. And a student with not much of an expertise may be knowing some things. So in spite of such a hierarchy, because both of them are interested in truth seeking, they can enter into that debate. But it is vada. If it is jalpa or vitanda, it can happen only between equals, and that equality is established through initial vada, and then you enter into a jalpa or vitanda. Okay, I'll skip that. Okay. So now, what is the perhaps answering to the question asked earlier on the methodology of how do you find the error? What is the issue in the argument given? So that requires some broad understanding of the logic process that are used here, because essentially the question will finally end up in the logic that the person has used. You can give some reference, the other person can give some reference, but the issue is not about the evidence per se, but the issue is about the interpretation of that evidence, and that interpretation follows some logical method. So what is a logical method? What are the errors in those logics is something that we need to be aware of to point out the errors in another person. So this requires some basic understanding of what is the logic process in the Indian traditional systems. So I'll keep using this very standard example just for simplicity, though there are probably better examples. But mountain has fire because it has smoke. So this is the form of an anumana. What we do in an anumana or the inferential statement is there are two attributes that we are connecting. One is having smoke, the other is having fire. It is not smoke or fire. It is the possession of that, which is an attribute. So you have one object, which is mountain, and there are two attributes, possessing fire, possessing smoke. So these are two attributes. One attribute gives us the information that is enough to infer another attribute in the same object. So because when you use some logic, there has to be some connecting point between these two elements, right? So object A inferring object B at some location, and that we are calling the broader basic object, and these two as attributes. So attribute A, that is having smoke, is this object called mountain. The same mountain will have fire also beneath the smoke, obviously. So you need to give some spatio-temporal relationship between attribute A and attribute B. It is, there is a debate between Nyaya and Vedanta schools that it need not be the same object. It can be a different object also. You have some heavy clouds, rainy clouds and torrential rains on the top of a hill. Then you infer that there is going to be some floods in the downstream. So the flood is downstream, whereas heavy rains is upstream. So the two objects are different. However, the connection is in some sense, you can establish the spatio-temporal relationship. So you can't infer that rain here can lead to some floods upstream. So the directionality of inferential relationship is also important. But to simplify those matters, what people do is, let's consider this as one object, one entity. So here, if you have rains in the upstream of that entity, then downstream of that entity will have floods. So that entity which we are using as one substratum can be called object, where these two as attributes. Okay, so one of those attributes is leading to the, so knowledge of one attribute leads to the knowledge of another attribute. So this we call vyapya. That becomes clearer in my next slide with a diagram. So we call one through which we are inferring another as vyapya and vyapaka. The relationship between them is called vyapti. This vyapti is not to be confused with the Vyapti we discussed yesterday while talking about Lakshana, Ativyapti, Avyapti, etc. So that is a different context. Here Vyapti is referring to the relationship. So object, attribute A and attribute B have a relationship that whenever you see attribute A, you can infer the presence of attribute B. So that is the relationship called Vyapti. Yes.
We have yesterday, because like in my position would be that if smoke comes, then it means there is a fire.
Correct.
Again, we are talking about some lakshana that whether like again these three problems will be asambhav, ativyapti, avyapti will be there, that whether a smoke can be present even if there is no fire, or uh, smoke can be present, like all these.
See, but dhuma, that is smoke, is connected with fire necessarily. Correct? So presence of smoke implies the presence of fire. But fire doesn't imply the presence of smoke.
Yes.
So let's take some hot iron. So you have fire or some good combustible gas. So which doesn't produce at least visible smoke. So fire can be there, but there is no smoke. Whereas if you remember the Lakshya-Lakshana relationship that we talked about yesterday, Lakshya and Lakshana, I think you only mentioned that it more or less comes to a position of disappearance of any difference between the two. So there is samavyapti between Lakshya and Lakshana. So all elements that are in Lakshya are the same elements in Lakshana also. So when we wanted to define a living being, all living beings were defined by our Lakshana, and this Lakshana was present only in those living beings. So there is a two-way relationship between in that Vyapti. Whereas here, it is not necessary to have that two-way relationship. Hold on for that, with that thought for a moment. Just finish the next slide. I think most of your questions are answered there. And then... Correct. So just for terminological clarity, Vyapti is a general relationship and Anumana is an application of that relationship. So you have Dhuma is always associated with Vanhi. So smoke is always associated with fire, is the Vyapti. This mountain has smoke, therefore this mountain has fire, is the Anumana. So Anumana is applying that generic principle to a specific context. Okay. So now what should be the kind of these attributes to be called in Vyapti? Let me skip that exercise, but go to this. So consider that there are two. So these are two attributes. Perhaps these are the only ways in which two attributes can be linked or not linked. So you can't, there cannot be any other diagrammatic representation of the relationship. I mean, they're just touching each other is irrelevant, because anyway we are talking about the elements inside. So some elements are overlapping, or one is inside the other, or there is some kind of an intersection, or they're completely different. These are the only ways, right, for any two attribute to be related to each other. So in this, what we are saying is that the first and the second on the top are good are good relationships that we can use to make an anuman. So but however, in the first one, direction is also important. You can infer the presence of vyapaka using vyapya, but not the presence of vyapya by using vyapaka, because vyapaka, so it's like this. I mean, consider this room as a part of the IIT campus. So if I am in this room, then I must be in IIT campus. If I'm in IIT campus, doesn't mean that I should be in this room. So you can't infer my presence in the room by my presence in IIT, but my presence in the room can infer my presence in IIT. So Vyapya is that which is pervaded by vyapaka. So vyapaka cannot infer vyapya, whereas vyapya can infer vyapaka. So there is a directionality here, whereas there are other attributes. I'll give one example from the Shastras. Yadyad vibhutimat sattvam shrimadurjitameva va tattadeva avagachatvam mama tejomsha sambhavam. So you see some special feature, some special ability in a person. So Krishna says, assume my special presence in that entity if you are seeing some extraordinary abilities in that entity. So there are two attributes here. Extraordinary performance or extraordinary abilities that you are seeing, and Lord's presence. So if you see extraordinary abilities, then the presence of Lord can be inferred. And if the Lord is present, there will be something that is extraordinary. So you can see a bidirectional relationship, which is like overlapping there. So the two attributes, you can use one to infer the other. Or I mean, there can be many more such. The classic example that the epistemological texts use is doing wrong things and getting papa out of that work. So papa sadhanata, that you know it leads you to some negative consequences, and it is a wrong act to do. So these two are coexisting. So if something is wrong, it will obviously give you some negative results. And if this is giving negative results, it must have been wrong. So so either of them can infer the other. Na asataha vidyate bhavaha. Which one you are referring to?
Whatever, like when we say that, when we talk about the vyapti, as we talked.
Correct. You're right.
that
So
is
in the
exactly
lakshana discussion, we were talking about the overlapping thing. So lakshya and lakshana are two attributes. So being called a jiva and having an voluntary movement. So these are two attributes. So they are overlapping. So always lakshya lakshana are overlapping. If they are not, if they are like any of these, then you will have avyapti, ativyapti, or one or the other problem, right? So you can't use the first as a lakshana, but you can use the first for anumana. So for anumana, you can use vyapya and make a inference of vyapaka. But lakshya or lakshana cannot be of that nature. Whereas lakshya and lakshana have to be of the nature of the second. Okay. But the problem is mostly when there are issues of the right bottom corner. We mostly use inferences of this nature which are erroneous. So the debates, the errors that you need to show are these. Well, you are using the first circle to infer the second circle, which is true in only some set of cases, but not elsewhere. So that is the problem that we are interested in. Okay, so let me skip that. Okay, so a formal anumana will have these things in its actual proposition. So the mountain has fire because it has smoke, like a kitchen, mahana savata, vetirekena hradavat. So like a pond. So contrary to a pond, or unlike a pond which has neither fire nor smoke, this has smoke, like in kitchen, therefore it must have fire. So you see the association between smoke and fire in a kitchen room, or in a, let's say, yajñashala, where you see smoke and fire, and the association is established from that multiple observations, and you use that relationship here, and you use presence of smoke as the reason to infer presence of fire as the conclusion. And the kitchen is used as a positive illustration, and pond is used as a negative illustration. Because I mean, using some basics of mathematical logic, A implies B is the same as negation of B implying negation of A. I mean, if you guys remember high school math, right? So is that right? So A implying B is the same as negation of B implying negation of A.
So what is the meaning? What is the reason of including pond in this discussion? Is it to make sure that this is not ativyapta?
It is to make sure that if you cannot, so that's actually a good question, and there is a debate in the Vedantic schools on, do you really need a Vyatireka Drishtanta? In the cases where you cannot provide an Anvaya Drishtanta, there are such situations where you can only show that the absences are related. Therefore, I make a theoretical construction that the presences must also be related, but I don't have a place to show. If you have a place to show those presences, then you can use only Anvaya Drishtanta. I'll give you one example. All living beings are conscious because they can feel pain. Okay, this is the anumana that I'm making. All living beings are conscious because they can feel pain. So feeling pain and having consciousness are related is my position. Where do I show this as an illustration? Because note my overall statement. I'm saying all living beings are conscious because they have feelings. Now, I'm trying to prove consciousness in all living beings. So I cannot use any living being as an illustration, because even that is under debate. My statement is a statement for debate. All living beings are conscious because they have feeling. If I had said human beings have consciousness because they have feelings, I could show animals as an example. Animals have feelings and they have consciousness. Similar to that, these people have feelings, therefore they must have consciousness. But my statement is not limited to human beings. I have included all living beings in my statement. All living beings are conscious because they have feelings. There is no place where I can show a positive illustration of this. So I go to a negative illustration space. So I show, look at this bottle. It does not have consciousness and it doesn't have feelings either. So in my cases, it is the opposite. So just that the direction gets reversed. A implies B. The implication is negation of B implies negation of A, not negation of A implying negation of A. So sadhana leading to sadhya is the same as sadhya bhava leading to sadhana bhava, not sadhana bhava leading to sadhya bhava. That's a little technical further level discussion, but I mean, mathematically you guys can understand, right? A implying B is the same as negation of B implying negation of A. So if I don't have a space where I can show both A and B, I will show spaces where I can show both absence of A and absence of B. So similar to that is the pond. But here, because I can show a kitchen, I don't need to use pond. So if I have a positive illustration that I can give, then I don't need to go for a negative illustration. But this negative illustration as an idea is coming from those edge cases where there may be situations where you have everything in the contested statement. So you can't give anything from that as an illustration. So you use an external negative case as an illustration. Is that?
So
yeah.
I mentioned that if there is smoke, then there should be fire. So there are certain physiography that there are smoke, like steam. There is some steam, but there is no such fire in that
Yeah, but that is steam, right? That's not smoke.
Vashpa something.
Bashpa is different from dhuma. Fog is different from smoke. And someone may say we can in chemistry lab produce smoke also without fire. So let's say natural smoke or something like that, just to be sure. It's about an, I mean, therefore, I mean, I understand that it is important to give examples, but I'm very hesitant to give examples because, I mean, we shouldn't get lost in the example space, but get the idea. So with that example, if we can get some of these constructs. So what is happening is there are all of these things going on here. One is the attribute to be proved. We call that sadhya. It's very, I mean, even in Hindi and many of the Indic terms we use, sadhya is something that we need to prove, it to be proved, right? The attribute that we use to prove, that is sadhana. So using sadhana, you use sadhya. There are many other names. I mean, upapatti, yukti, linga, all these largely refer to the same idea of a sadhana, but this is a little easier to remember. So one is sadhya, then you have sadhana. So using sadhana, you prove sadhya. Then there is this paksha. Paksha is the object. So the mountain is the paksha. So in mountain, you have sadhana and you prove sadhya. So you have dhuma, which is sadhana, and you prove vanhi, which is sadhya. Then there are other objects, such as the kitchen in this example, where both parties agree that sadhya and sadhana exist, where it is no more a sadhya, it is not contested. Therefore, I have that in bold. It is not a, in mountain, fire is contested. Before I use this statement, the other person is not ready to accept that there is actually fire. Then I use a logical statement saying, well, this has fire because there is smoke. But at the time of using this statement, while we are doing this debate, the presence of fire is contested. Whereas in the kitchen, both of us have agreed that there is fire and there is smoke. So such places are called sapakshas. They are like paksha because they have both sadhya and sadhana, but the sadhya is accepted by both parties, whereas in paksha, one of them is not agreeing to the presence of the sadhya there. So we call that, one is sandigdha sadhyavan. So the sadhya is sandigdha in paksha. So sadhya is under discussion. Whereas in sapaksha, the sadhya has already been established to be present. Vipaksha is the absence of sadhya has been established. So the pond. So the pond becomes the vipaksha. The kitchen becomes the paksha. But we are, so in sapaksha, so okay, so I need to clarify one small bit. So sapaksha is that where the contested, that is the sadhya, a similar entity as the sadhya is present. So fire is there, that is sapaksha. Fire is absent, that is vipaksha. Fire and smoke both are present, then it is drishtanta. That is example. Fire and smoke both are absent, that is negative drishtanta. So there is a fine difference between sapaksha and anvaya drishtanta. Sapaksha is where sadhya, that is the contested attribute, that is present, but we are not commenting on the sadhana. We are not saying whether the sadhana should also be there or not. Some sapakshas need not have the sadhana. So, I mean, look at the mountain example itself. So, mountain has fire because it has smoke. Take the example of hot iron. So that has fire, does not have smoke. So it is sapaksha. So the contested element, which is the fire, is there, but there is no smoke. So that is sapaksha. Whereas kitchen is not only sapaksha, it is also a drishtanta. Because drishtanta is the relationship getting established. Whereas sapaksha is not where you show the relationship. You only see the presence of the contested element without worrying about whether the tool you use to prove it is present or not. And why that becomes important becomes clearer in the next slide when we talk about the errors in reasoning. So sapaksha is presence of sadhya, vipaksha is absence of sadhya, anvaya drishtanta is presence of sadhya and sadhana, vyatireka drishtanta is absence of sadhya and sadhana. So all sapakshas need not be anvaya drishtantas, whereas all anvaya drishtantas have to be sapakshas. Similarly, the other, all vipakshas need not be vyatireka drishtantas, but all vyatireka drishtantas need to be vipakshas. Now, I know it's going to be a little overwhelming, but this is the actual stuff of conducting these things. So it's required to be familiar with these terms. So to articulate those sadhya, sadhana, paksha, vipaksha, all of this, we have a 5 component. If you remember, the very first definition of vada from the Nyaya Sutra said Panchavayava upapannaha pramana tarka sadhanopalambhaha siddhanta aviruddhaha Panchavayava upapannaha. So I translated that as having a 5-membered logic which has proposition, reason, example, reaffirmation, and conclusion. Those are the 5 things that I'm explaining now. So basically, when you articulate a logical statement, you will have these 5 components. The mountain has fire, that is pratigna. So it is like the claim. So what is it that you are claiming to prove? So articulation of paksha. Paksha is not just the mountain, but the mountain having fire. That whole thing together is the paksha. So that is your claim. So it is pratigna. Then you use hetu. You use the reason to prove that point. So that becomes the articulation of linga. This is articulation. So note the it is not just the linga, but how you articulate that linga. So that is the hetu. Then you talk about udaharana. Udaharana is vyapti plus drishtanta. So the classic example is parvataha vanhiman. That becomes pratigna. Dhumavatvat. So because it has dhuma, that becomes hetu. Then udaharana is yatra dhumaha tatra vanhihi yatha mahanasaha. So that whole thing where you articulate vyapti and a drishtanta. So that becomes udaharana. Then so that is a affirmation, that is telling you the general rule. Now you take that general rule to this context. So you made a claim, you gave a reason, then you said why this reason is to be important, and you showed an example. Then you say this parvata also has that kind of a dhuma which you saw in kitchen. That becomes upanaya. So you are bringing that general principle to this context, and then you are saying hence proved. So 1, 2 are essentially the same as 4, 5, just that 1 and 2 are at a claim level, 4 and 5 are at a, so if you look at it as a mathematical theorem from high school math level, so what is to be proved is pratigna. How you prove, the methodology you use is kind of hetu. Then the actual, the proof that you provide is the vyapti. So then you show, therefore, this also has that vyapti, hence proved. So that is the, the 5-membered step-by-step articulation of how you talk about an anumana in a in a articulated manner. Yes.
Sir, why can't we take dristant to be udarana by itself?
No, I mean, these are just terminological things.
Like,
Drishtanta refers to just the nidarshanam drishtanta, just the place where the two are present. Udaharana, terminology, it's a terminology saying udaharana is articulation of not just drishtanta, but also vyapti.
so with this drishtant, I want to establish this.
Correct.
This means the entire thing will be called an udaharan.
Correct.
And just
Telling about that illustration is called drishtanta.
Drishtanta. Okay.
Okay. So now, what are the errors that you can think of with all of these in mind? For this to be so this is the crux of how do you find errors in the opponent's views. So essentially, you need 5 things in a hetu for that hetu to be a right hetu. For that hetu is the reason, articulation of the reason. So that reason to be correct, you need all of these to be present. So first, that hetu should be present in the paksha. So look at this mountain has fire because it has smoke. So it has smoke is the hetu. So that's the reason. So that reason can become a kind of a pseudo reason, hetva abhasa. Abhasa means it appears like hetu, but it is not a good hetu. So hetva bhasa is, so what are the things that may appear like hetu, but they are not good hetus, then they are called hetva bhasas. So to understand that, we need to first understand what is a good hetu. So good hetu will have the right reason, will have these 5 components. One, it is present in the place where you are trying to prove. So presence in paksha. So mountain must have fire, mountain must have smoke. If mountain itself doesn't have smoke, however good your vyapti may be, but this mountain doesn't have smoke, so it is irrelevant. So you can't prove the presence of fire here because this doesn't have smoke. So vyapti may be good, but the application here is incorrect. Therefore, presence becomes important. Second, it should be present in some sapaksha. Otherwise, how do I understand that relationship? I'm not saying presence in all sapakshas, but presence in some sapaksha where I can understand how they are related to each other. Then it should be presence, it should be absent from all vipaksha. I should have added that word there, but absence from all vipaksha. I mean, if you can see, because what we are trying to do is, we are using sadhana, that is hetu, to establish sadhya. But if that hetu can be present at a place where there is no sadhya, then the hetu has this kind of a relationship where it is not necessary that it will lead us only to sadhya. It may lead us outside of the sadhya also, so which is vipaksha. So the hetu should not be present in any of the vipakshas. And then there should not be any evidence that has already proven that the sadhya doesn't actually exist. So you don't even go up to the hetu level. So if somebody says the pond has fire, okay, then I will stop him there. Well, don't even give me the reason, because pond just cannot have fire. So giving a reason in a place where the absence of sadhya is already known is another error. So we already know that, okay, so this computer or this machine can feel because of something, but I would say, well, I'm not interested in knowing your reason, because at that moment itself, I know that you're saying something that is contradictory, something that is by definition incorrect. So the absence of what you are trying to prove in this object has already been established a priori. Then your reason is incorrect. The last one is, you are giving me a reason, but that reason can work both ways. So, for example, I mean, this is a standard debate between the Dvaita Advaita scholarship. This world is real because it is cognizable, because you can know about it. This world is unreal or is not real because it is cognizable. So Advaita uses the argument Drishyatvat mithya. This is not real because it is cognizable. Like a a snake in a rope. So you cognize a snake in a rope, but snake is not real and it is cognized. So anything that gets cognized is not real. Sorry, due to Maya. Yeah. So here in the Dvaita argument, well, it is real because it is cognized. Take not a rope snake example, but some, here is a water bottle. I'm cognizing it and I take water from it and drink. It is real. So I am cognizing. So it is real. So anything that gets cognized is real is the argument here. Anything that gets cognized is not real is the argument from another school. So a hetu that after being used can be countered either by the same hetu or by another hetu, by another logic. So that is the last error for a reasoning. So basically the reason itself can be problematic if it is not present in the place where we are trying to prove, if it is not present in any place where I can show the relationship, if it is present in a place where it should not be present, or the absence of the hetu has already been established by something else, or even at the time of my usage of an argument, there is a possibility for an opposite argument to be made, either using the same logic or another logic. In all these cases, the logic is incorrect. So when none of these errors exist, then that is a right reasoning. You had a question?
Yes, sir. Can you please go to that slide? So when we have established the presence in sapaksha and absence in vipaksha, why do we again need to check that there is no evidence has already proven?
That's a good question.
The fourth question.
So
point.
that is Madhva's critique on the Nyaya school. So this is coming from the Nyaya view. So he argues that the last two should be seen as paksha doshas rather than hetu doshas. So they're not errors of the reason, they're errors in your claim. Your claim, there is a problem in the pratigna you're making. So you're saying pond is, I know pond has fire. So you say, no, that is incorrect because pond has already been known to not have fire. So I'm not interested in listening to the reason. But that is not a problem of the reason per se. It is a problem with the claim you are making. So, but what the Nayayikas said was true, but you are using some reason in a wrong place. Therefore, it is a reason's error also. That's a convoluted argument to make. But the Nayayikas started with this. But the exact critique that you mentioned is what Madhvacharya says. Therefore, you take only the first three. That is good enough to call it a good hetu. Whereas the next two are coming in the virodha of the pratigna. The first three are in the hetu virodha. They are the problems of the hetu, the reasoning per se, whereas the last two are the problems of the claim per se. So, correct. So, if you look at this, so just to summarize that hetva bhasa discussion, so you have if it is a correct hetu, I'm talking from the Nyaya framework, it should be present in paksha, that is what I'm calling Shuddha Hetu. And it should be present in Sapaksha, not in Vipaksha. There should not be Badha, we call that Badha, that there is already a counter evidence that it is not there. So that we call Badha. So if there is no Badha and there is no Sat Pratipaksha is a counter evidence during the time of debate. It is not a priori established, but you can provide a counter evidence as a counter logic. So that is Sat Pratipaksha. Even that should not be present for a correct logic. So if it is the true logic, then it is present in Paksha, Sapaksha, absent from Vipaksha, there is no Badha and there is no Sat Pratipaksha. If any of these combinations get messed up, then you end up with one or the other error. So all these mentioned here are different kinds of errors. In the Madhva framework, he says, well, there are only two errors. You either don't have it in the Paksha or you have a problem with the relationship. So if both are these are fine, then you don't need to make a sundry list of, well, the multiple permutations and combinations. But the Nayayikas are keen on giving more details. So they came up with these multiple things where they said, well, Asiddha refers to not being in Paksha. Viruddha refers to being absent in Sapaksha but being in Vipaksha, which is the opposite of how it should be. So what you are doing is you are actually proving the opposite. So for example, this mountain has fire because it is cold. So if you use that as a reasoning, when something is cold, it cannot have fire there. So it will in fact prove the opposite, that there is no fire, therefore it's cold. So so it's absent in Sapaksha but present in Vipaksha, or it is present everywhere in Paksha, Sapaksha, Vipaksha, which means there is so the term used is Anaikantika. So Ekanta is one goal. It does not have that one goal of reaching the Sadhya. It reaches you to the Sadhya, opposite of Sadhya, Vipaksha also. It takes you to prove fire. It may also take you to prove the absence of fire. So it is not a good enough reason. And it is not present in Sapaksha or in Vipaksha. So you don't have a place where you can see whether it is really the case. So Anadhyavasita is kind of indeterminate. So you don't know how it actually behaves. Kalatya Yapadishta, Satpratipaksha and Prakarana Sama are, Kalatya Yapadishta refers to presence of Badha, which means technically the term Kalatitata or Kalatya Yapadishta means you have missed the time. That is, it has already been established as the opposite. Now you are using some argument to prove. So the time is out where the pond has already been established to not have fire, and now you are coming up with some logic. It's not relevant anymore. Then Satpratipaksha is giving an opposite argument. Prakarana Sama is also an opposite argument, but using the same hetu, like the one that I mentioned. This world is real because of Drishyata. The world is not real because of Drishyatva. Or you use a different argument, but coming at the similar point. So let me use this last 5 minutes to talk about this idea of Nigrahasthānas. So these are the Hetva bhasas that I mentioned are the core problems. So these have to be raised even in a Vada. So if in a Vada, anyone is using a reason that has any of these errors, then that has to be responded to and said, well, you have given a wrong reasoning, please correct it, this cannot work. Whereas in Jalpa and Vitanda, there may be multiple other types of errors, which are not very core, but they are minor errors that you should still hold the person accountable to and win and use that to appeal against the person to the umpire and ask them to declare the other guy defeated. So those are Nigrahasthānas.
वादस्य लक्षणमेवं भवति साध्याभावत् वृत्तित्वं साध्याभावे पक्षे यदि साध्यं नास्ति चेत् तदा बाधादोषः भवति इति
सत्यं साध्याभाववृत्तित्वं हेतोः
यदि पक्षे साध्यं नास्ति चेत् तदपि बाधा एव खलु पक्षे साध्यं नास्ति चेत्
पक्षे साध्यं नास्ति चेत्
व्यभिचार अनैकान्तिक व्यभिचारे नास्ति बाधदोषस्तावत् साध्यस्य एव साधनस्य एव भवति साधनस्य न भवति कुतो वा अत्र निर्देशः?
किन्तु प्रमाणपद्धत्यादौ एवमेव उक्तं किल, बाधः
बाधः एवं भवितुं शक्यते।
हा
साध्य
अहं तत्र हेत्वाभासत्वेन बाधं न निर्दिष्टवान्, कालात्ययापदिष्टतां निर्दिष्टवान्। तत्र
पर्यायवाची एव, बाधस्य पर्यायवाची कालात्ययापदिष्टत्वं।
कालात्ययापदिष्टता तु हेतुदोषत्वेनैव अङ्गीकृतः।
साध्यस्य अयं दोषः, यतोहि साध्यं
किन्तु
यदि पक्षे नास्ति चेत् तदा एव कालात्ययापदिष्टत्वं भवति।
सत्यं, किन्तु साध्याभाववति पक्षे हेतोः वृत्तित्वमेव कालात्ययापदिष्टता नाम्ना निर्दिश्यते किल। अतः हेतुदोषत्वेनैव सत्यं यदुक्तं भवद्भिः तत् आचार्यैः टीकाकृत्पादैश्च पक्षाभासे अङ्गीकार्यं, पक्षाभासाः उदाहरणाभासाश्च तैः न उदाहृताः, तदपि करणीयम् इत्युक्त्वा कुतो हेत्वाभासे एतेषां अन्तर्भावः कृतः इति तैः आक्षिप्तं। किन्तु नैयायिकैस्तु हेत्वाभासमध्ये एव कालात्ययापदिष्टतायाः निर्देशः कृतः।
कालात्ययापदिष्टत्वं साध्यस्य एव दोषः।
साध्यस्य एव दोषः सत्यं, किन्तु प्राचीनन्याये हेतुदोषत्वेनैव अङ्गीकारः कृतः। तन्न समीचीनम् इति वेदान्तिनां मतम्। अहं द्वयमपि अत्र उपस्थाप्य
विषमपदवाक्यार्थविवृतौ एवम् उक्तमस्ति, साध्यस्य दोषः भवति, साध्ये यदि दोषः भवति तद् हेतुद्वारा एव भवति इति कृत्वा,
हेतुद्वारा भवति इति नैयायिकानां मतं। किन्तु प्रथमतः एव हेतोः उच्चारणात् पूर्वमेव अस्माभिः साध्याभावः निश्चेतुं शक्यते। अतः प्रतिज्ञादोष एव प्रतिज्ञादोषत्वेनैव अङ्गीकार्यः, न तु हेतुदोषत्वेन इति वेदान्तिनां मतम्। Okay, so the Nigrahasthānas. So there are 22 of them that the Nayayikas have listed. The Dvaita Vedantins argue that this was perhaps an uninteresting exercise. You have done some long list. You could have done it in a neat category of 6, and it is possible to subsume all of them in 22 into the 6 categories. But it is giving some interesting details about how things can go wrong. So pratigna hani. So you start with something. The mountain has fire since it is cognizable. Obviously, well, that's not correct. It has the dosha of anaikantika. So I start with that position. This has fire because I can see this mountain. Well, anything that you see, I can see this room. It doesn't have fire. So seeing has no relationship to fire. So your reasoning suffers from the problem of anaikantika, is how a opponent would tell. Then this guy would say, yes, I agree. So that is an error. You should actually establish why your earlier reasoning was correct rather than agreeing with the opponent's view. Because, I mean, if you remember, this is not a truth-seeking exercise. This is an exercise where you want to prove by hook or crook you are the right proponent of the idea. So you started with some wrong reasoning. The opponent showed that your reasoning is wrong. Now you have to show that the opponent was wrong in his objection rather than accepting it. If you accept, then, so if you say, I agree, then the opponent will appeal to the umpire saying, see, this guy is accepting, so declare him defeated. So what is the error that what is the name that you give to that error is pratigna hani. So you made some pratigna at the beginning, you have used some reasoning and a claim. Now you are saying, yes, I agree. So which means you have given up the claim that you made and therefore you are declared defeated. So points of defeat, Nigrahasthānas, refer to different ways of getting the opponent out. So, like as I said, it can be easily compared with any other game, any sporting event where you have 10 ways in which you can get the opponent out. So there are 22 ways in which you can get the opponent out. So the person started with some claim, the opponent objected, and this guy agreed. So agreeing to the opponent's view and not justifying what you started with is an error. The second, you change the claim after you come to know that there was an error. So you don't give up the claim. Giving up or accepting was the first error. Here you make some finer changes. You started with Atma Sharira is eternal. Then you say, oh, that means you're talking about Jivatma Sharira. Jivatma Sharira is known to be temporary. No, I meant Paramatma Sharira. Oh, okay, so you're making that fine change. So you are defeated by the point called pratigyantaram. So you're changing the claim with which you started. Then pratignya virodha. So you make a contradictory claim. So me mata vandhya, my biological mother does not have children. So if you make a statement like that, so it is contradictory. So by that it is pratignya virodha. Then pratignya sannyasa. Sannyasa is denying the fact that you made the claim to begin with. After somebody shows the error, so you made a claim, you're shown an error, then you say, no, I never said that. I never made that claim to begin with. But everyone would have documented what you have said. So it is pratignya sannyasa. Sannyasa is literally giving up, renouncing whatever you have actually claimed. Then similar to pratignantara is hetvantara, where you change the reasoning. You change the claim or you change the reasoning. So then it is a meaningful idea, but a useless idea. So that's arthantara. Smoke. So for example, you start with, there are other examples given in classical text, but I've just used something that is more relatable. So mountain has fire because it has smoke, and smoke has carbon that can be injurious to health, and you go on giving a lecture about smoke, right? Well, great. You're giving some meaningful set of sentences that are making coherent sense and are logical, but are just irrelevant to the context here. So that is arthantara. So in the classical text, what they say is parvato vanhiman dhumavatvat atra dhumavatvam hetuhu hetu shabdascha hinoti iti dhatoho evam nishpannaha ityadi. So that is irrelevant. So you're talking, how did the term hetu come grammatically? What is the root word for understanding linga? So those are not relevant for the context here. We are just interested in establishing the relationship between smoke and fire. I'm not interested in whether smoke is injurious to my health or not. Right? So that is arthantara. Then nirarthaka is meaningless set of words. Mountain has florbs because it has frangibles. I asked ChatGPT to give me some words that have no meaning. So flops and frangibles perhaps don't have any meaning. So there is no there is no meaning to that word at all. So that is nirarthaka. Avijñātartha is, it has meanings, but you can't make sense of it. It has correct meanings also, but it is so complicated that for a debating context, you are not writing a novel or a poem here. So the craggy heights alight with incandescence. This is also ChatGPT generated, where I said, well, if you look at it, it basically is saying mountain has fire because it has smoke. So the craggy heights alight with incandescence, that is the smoke. As the nebulous vapors surrounding its summit foreshadow a fiery confluence mirroring the celestial infernos that embrace its majestic form, whatever. So basically, so but there is a more kind of interesting for Sanskrit enthusiasts, the example that is given in the classical text there. Kashyapa tanaya dhruti heturayam Trinayana tanayasana samana namadheya yuktaha tadhvajavatvat. This is also saying parvato vanhiman dhumavatvat. Basically, Kashyapa tanaya is Prithvi. Prithvi is daughter of Kashyapa. Kashyapa tanaya dhriti hetuhu. Dhriti is dharada. So bhudhara is parvata. So parvatas actually hold the earth. So that's how it is generally discussed in literature. So Kashyapa tanaya dhruti hetuhu ayam. means Parvataha ayam. So this mountain. Trinayana Tanayasana Samana Namadheya Yuktaha. Trinayana is Rudra, Shiva. Trinayana Tanaya is Shanmukha or Skanda. Trinayana Tanaya's asana is so the vehicle, his Mayura, peacock, right? So Trinayana Tanayasana Samana Namadheya. So Trinayana Tanayasana is Mayura, and Mayura's synonym is Shikhi. It is also called Shikhi in Sanskrit. So Shikhi is a synonym for fire also. So the mountain has something that has a synonym to the vehicle of the son of Shiva. Okay, because it has its dhwaja. Dhwaja is so that which is mounted on something but is seen at the top. So basically dhuma. So the Vanhi dhwaja is dhuma. So you are basically saying Parvataha Vanhiman Dhumavatvat. But you use this complicated poetic language. Kashyapatanaya dhruti heturayam Trinayana Tanayasana Samana Namadheya Yuktaha Tadhvajavatvat. So this is avijñātartha. No one is able to comprehend what you are trying to say. Okay. Yes. Yes, because I mean, no one is able to understand what you are talking about. So you're expected to make some, you're invited here for a conversation. So what you're saying is not comprehensible to anybody. So you are defeated for this unnecessary show of your, don't know whether it is scholarship or not, but whatever. Correct. So these are points of defeat. So showing your scholarship, which is not even comprehensible, is a type of Nigrahasthāna. So avijñātartha. And they actually say that it is not comprehensible, it is not incomprehensible only by the Prativadi. But nobody, even the Prashnika, the Sabhapati, the audience, no one is able to understand what you are talking about. So then it is avijñātartha. And in fact, they say trivaram uktepi. You have to repeat it thrice. I mean, it is possible that you're making some complicated argument I'm not able to comprehend. So can you please repeat? I can ask once. I will ask twice. But even after him repeating it thrice, no one is able to comprehend. So then that articulation itself is becomes a point of defeat. Okay, he's using something that is not making sense. Aparthaka is meaningful but disconnected. Animal, laptop, friend, mobile, kitchen. So it's a sentence seemingly, but you can't make sense of it. It is not like the previous one. Nirarthaka is meaningless words, whereas these are meaningful words, but there is no connection between them. So this is aparthaka. Aprapta kala is incorrect order. Because it has smoke, mountain has fire. Madhva and Jaitirtha do not agree with this. They say, well, what's the problem? I mean, whatever is the order should be okay as far as people can understand. But the Nayayikas say, no, you should follow some order. So if you miss that order, that is also a point of defeat. You should start with the claim, then you talk about the reason, then you give the example. The position from the Dvaita Vedanta perspective is it doesn't matter. I mean, as long as you can communicate the idea, whichever order it is, it's fine. In fact, I should just mention one point. So there is a huge critique. I mean, not fundamentally altering this, but there are problems in terms of this just sundry listing, and also some of these, for example, this aprapta kala that I mentioned as not a nigrahasthana, but even this pratignyantara. So Jaitirtha makes one interesting observation. He says pratignyantara is not a nigrahasthana. That is, you made one claim, you are shown an error, then you change the claim. Okay. So what is your point? Your point is changing the claim is an error. So I have to make you declared defeated using the point that you have changed the claim. That is what you're saying. So Jaitirtha's argument is the previous katha continuing or has it concluded? Is it the second debate or the first debate? If it is the first debate, which is Atma Sharira is eternal, and the opponent has given you Badha as an error, there are only two possibilities. What he told as Badha is correct or incorrect. If that guy was correct, then the debate closes there. Where is the scope for you to change the claim? It can't move to the third step. At the second step, if the error as Badha is admissible, so objection is raised. If the jury accepts this objection, then you are defeated. If the jury does not allow this objection, then the objector is defeated for raising an objection where none existed. So there is no scope to move to the third point. One of you, either of you, will be defeated at the second point. So the third, the scope to change the objection, change the claim, does not even arise in the first katha. That should close. Then you start a new katha. So now start second round or second debate. And you are starting with that as the first statement. Where is the error here? So pratignyantara is not an error for point of defeat. So these are, there are a lot of these minor fine tuning that people have done in terms of what is a real point of defeat and what is not. But I just want to give that one example. Can I take another 4-5 minutes just to conclude this? I think it's, but how is your mess timings and other, so would that be okay? 5 minutes, okay. So then Nyuna. So you say less than what is required. So mountain has fire as in an Yajnashala, but you're not giving the reason. So that is, so Nyuna is less than what is to be told. Adhika is connected, useful, non-repetitive, but more than what is required. It is redundant. So mountain has fire because it has smoke and is bright. Well, it has smoke is good enough. I don't need to know another reason because it is bright. It may be a good enough reason. It is good. It is useful and is not repetitive. But giving an additional information is also an error where you could have established it with just one reason. You're just wasting time of everybody. You could have established it in one step. Why are you taking 5 other steps to arrive at the same conclusion? So debate is also seen as one's intellectual clarity and ability to convey things in the shortest and the forcible and the right manner. So that's also another problem. Punarukta is repetition with no additionality, nothing. The mountain has fire and you keep saying that multiple times without going into the next. You may go to the next step also, but you're still unnecessarily making repetitions. Or ananubhashana, where it is, so once the one person makes a claim, you should be able to repeat that and show where the errors are. But if your reiteration has some problems, you just say, you keep uttering, oh, this, that you mentioned, and you're not clearly articulating. Or you say only part of the opponent's argument and are forgetting the next part and are ignoring. Or you mention only the error, but you don't say where that error is. So you have to show, okay, this is what you said, here is the error. Or you're reproducing it incorrectly, or you're just keeping silent, you're not responding. So all of these are ananubhashana. Then it can be ignorance, where you're not understanding. Everybody else is understanding, but you're not understanding. So which is unlike the avijñātartha, the Shashi Tharoor kind of thing. The apratibha is you understand, but you lack you don't have a response. You understand the problem, but you don't have a response. and that is apratibha. You don't have talent to find the response to this. Vikshepa, you give some evading reason. No, I have some urgent meeting, I have to go now. So that becomes Vikshepa. What Jaitirtha says is, well, you have given these three, but look at it practically. How do we know as to what is driving? Is it Ajnana or Apratibha or Vikshepa? This guy is not responding. That much we know. Is it because of ignorance? Is it because of his inability to respond? Is it because of something else? We don't know. Therefore, though this is a good psychoanalysis, it can't be used as a point of defeat. So only thing that you can say is anukti. You're not responding, and that is an error. So rather than making this as ajnana, apratibha, vikshepa, better to club all of these into one category called anukti. Is the matanugnya is pushing the opponent to accept what they have already accepted. So somebody is saying, well, I'm a thief, so don't accuse me that I'm a thief, but my point is to prove that you're a thief. Okay, so what I'm doing is, you're a thief because you are a man. So that guy will say, well, what is this? Then you're also a thief because you are a man. He would say, well, I have already said that, so don't accuse me of something that I have already accepted. So you don't know my position. Generally, it can be a wrong thing to do. I mean, accusing somebody as a thief is a good enough accusation. But in my case, I've already accepted this is not something new to me. So you're not providing any new idea, new objection. So that becomes matanugnya. Paryanuyojya upekshana is talking about ignoring a real error. So what happens is, I make an error, that guy is unable to pick it up, then I say that guy is out because he couldn't pick up my error. So I made a wrong reason. I gave a wrong reason because I have perhaps by mistake, or I have already lost, and I don't think there are good chances. So I start giving some wrong reasoning. But this guy fails to recognize my wrong reasoning. So then I appeal to the umpire saying, see, this was the error that I made, but he failed to recognize the error in my statement. Therefore, he must be declared defeated for being unable to recognize the error. So ignoring a real error is also a point of defeat. No, it's not going in anukti, because that guy is responding without showing the error. So anukti means non-response, being silent, but he's responding, but he forgot to identify, or he missed identifying the error in the first person's objection, the position. Niranuyojya anuyoga is, so it's the opposite of the previous. So the previous one is ignoring a real error. Here, showing an error where none exists. So for example, you misrepresent and then say that you are wrong. So the classic example given is gam anaya. Go refers to cow, or the cattle. So bring the go. This guy says, well, go has multiple meanings in Sanskrita, so it must perhaps be meaning earth. Bring earth is an impossible task. So you are making a statement which is impossible, therefore your statement is wrong. So you're misrepresenting my position, knowing very well that nobody is talking about bringing the earth here. Bringing the cow was the statement. So deliberate misrepresentation and rebuttal is an error committed by the opponent that this guy can recognize and show. And if you remember, this was the chala that I was talking about in Jalpa. So in Jalpa, people use these tactics just to try, if anyway they're running out of options, so let me misrepresent and refute this guy. If he fails to give a proper response, if I say, well, you meant go, so go refers to this, and this is impossible, so you're making a wrong statement. So that guy may become anxious, oh, I should have used a better word or something like that, rather than justifying his thing. So then he gets defeated. So this guy, if he fails to recognize the chala done by the opponent, then that chalavadi wins. So chala is applied as a tool there. Jati is an important response. So it is a response given, but it is inherently flawed. So I say, you're saying mountain has fire because it has smoke. Well, then mountain must also have some vessels, as in a kitchen. Obviously, that's a wrong response because there is no relationship. Because the core idea is the relationship. It is not about analogy. Whatever is there in kitchen should not be present in mountain just because of smoke. But he is giving that response, which is incorrect response. But this guy fails to recognize that. So then he may win. So if that response is wrong one, so you have to show that he is giving a jatyuttara. It's a contradictory thing. It is incorrect response this guy is giving. So then raising any of the above that were inapplicable. All the ones that were discussed till here, none of them were there, but you claim it is matanugnya, it is pratignya hani, something which is not there, then that becomes niryanuyoga. Then aprapta kale grahana is wrongly timing the objection, objecting to a statement that was made some 4 steps prior. So you made a statement now, then the discussion is continuing for 3-4 steps. Now you realize that there was an error 3 steps ago, and now you raise that. That is, raising that is an error, because this is not the time to raise that. You should have raised it 3 rounds earlier, right? Then apasiddhanta, deviating from one's own school. So Prabhakara Mimamsakas, for example, they don't accept the God, so they're happy with karma. So if in the course of debate they say, okay, this is done by Ishvara, then well, you are going against your own school. So that is apasiddhanta. And hetva bhasas, we have discussed at the beginning itself, all the incorrect reasonings, the 7 types, asiddha, etc., etc. So I mean, this is just a very, 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 a broad and a quick overview of how. But obviously, when you go into more details and take examples and enact perhaps a debate, that becomes the all the. So I'll share these slides. Essentially, what I have in the last set of 5-10 slides is all these Nigrahasthānas were reviewed and kind of revised in Madhvacharya's works. And he says you can subsume all of this in just the category of 6 things, which he calls virodha, asangati, nyuna, adhika, and samvada, anukti. Errors in content, errors in articulation, and errors in the debater. And how all these 22 can be subsumed in that. So finally comes up with this overall subtypes, how virodha is at the claim level, that is pratignya, at the hetu level, that is reasoning, then at the udaharana level, that is the drishtanta. So what are all the different types there? How these can can be merged with the Nayayika framework is what the Madhvacharya's contribution to that is. So I'll share these slides, but thank you very much. It was a new experience for me to hopefully we should be able to engage further and try to see where the common grounds are between some of the Indian knowledge, thoughts, and whatever fields you may be working in. And also we can take this pramana and katha, probably Professor Anil and Srivardhan way, think of some future steps that we can take together, and I'll be happy to contribute and be in constant touch. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Srinidhi sir, for this amazing session. I'm sure we all have learned something new and we'll be able to take it forward also. I would like to request Pawan Kumar Mohodaya to present a small token of gratitude from our side to Dr. Srinidhi.
By the way, I would request all of you to do, in the very first session, I had talked about one short note that if you can prepare as to some 200, 300 words, if not more, as to what you learned, what were the new things, how it might help, and what are the new, areas and support systems that you require. We can work that out. So that's the idea. Thank you.
Sanskrit Club IIT Roorkee would like to thank Dr. Srinidhi sir for this session, and we hope we'll be able to cooperate more and arrange for more sessions in the future. We would also like to thank all the participants for actively involving in the discussions, etc. And we request you to submit the 250 to 300 word short note which sir has requested you to write. You can share it on WhatsApp to me also, and I'll be sending it to sir through mail. We'll upload the slides also in the group, and the recordings are also available. So in case if anyone wants to go through in the future, or if you would like to share it to someone, you can do so. I would also like to thank the support staff of LHC, the live streaming staff for their support, and also big thanks to Sanskrit Club volunteers for organizing this workshop. Thank you all. We will now go for the Shanti Mantra, requesting all of you to join with me.
ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः